Hi, I'm Anthony Newbold. Welcome to A Closer Look, where you, the public, get to hear unique insights and in-depth discussions from the people who help to put policy into practice. For us this week, that's Mr. Carl Smith. He's the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management, and Reconstruction. P.S. Smith, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ms. Newell.
Listen, I've been trying to get one of y'all here forever, so thank you for coming. Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management, and Reconstruction. What falls under the remit of that ministry? Tell me.
Okay, well, the ministry was formed in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian, which you know was a Category 5, quite intense, the strongest that we have experienced in the Bahamas, indeed in the region. So the government, in its wisdom, formed the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management, and Reconstruction, and under its remit falls the National Emergency Management Agency and the Disaster Reconstruction Authority. Now, NEMA, or the National Emergency Management Agency, has been formed under the Disaster Preparedness and Response Act, which was promulgated in 2009. And the NEMA primary focus has been preparing and responding to disasters. The Reconstruction Authority is to deal with recovery and rehabilitation.
Okay. You're the PS, as we like to call you, Permanent Secretary, yes. Sort of the CEO, if you will. You make sure that stuff functions in that ministry. Give us some idea of your responsibilities as the Permanent Secretary there.
Okay, as Permanent Secretary, as is the responsibility of all Permanent Secretaries, they are to lead the, assist with the formulation of policy and the implementation of a strategy, the articulation of a strategy, the implementation of plans to, for the functioning of the ministry, and in this case, that would be the ministry, NEMA, and the DRA. And the DRA. So it's an awesome responsibility. So for example, the many caps that we wear, one of them is to put forward to the minister, and may I say this about the ministry. The minister who's responsible is the Prime Minister, and he has appointed a Minister of State to assist him in the implementation of or responding to and preparing for disasters. So that's the way we are structured. As we would have had, for example, in the past, in the Ministry of National Security, there was the Minister of National Security and a Minister of State.
Tell me, as we talk about, and you referred to this strategy, what is the strategic vision for your new ministry?
Well, the Bahamas is an archipelagic country, and it is our vision that it prepares for, withstands, and recovers from man-made and natural disasters, and promotes the safety and the quality of life of all of its citizens, and this is throughout the Bahamas, in a resilient and sustainable communities with access to critical infrastructure, water, electricity, and so forth, and all of the islands through education, awareness, the promotion of respect for the natural and cultural environment, and using community-based approaches. And it's an all of government commitment to the development, to resilient development. So the ministry relies heavily on all of government, and it kind of oversees what other agencies do. So for example, we have the Ministry of Works. The Ministry of Works is responsible for infrastructure.
Right.
We have the Ministry of Social Services and Development. We don't assume their role.
Right.
But when you're talking about disasters and preparing for them and mitigating against the impact of hazards, in our case, hurricanes are the main one, then everyone has to be involved. And we don't wait until you suffer from an impact. So when you speak of resilience, there are things that you can do prior to a disaster so that the impact of the disaster is minimized. So when we speak of resilience in the community, let us use, for example, the COVID pandemic that we are facing here in Bahamas and indeed around the world. It has uncovered communities that are very vulnerable, right? So whatever we do in development, in the development of our country, we need to make sure that everybody at all levels are taken care of, so to speak, that they are resilient, that their livelihoods, say for example, we have fishermen, we have farmers, they have to be able to bounce back and get going again. So that's what we talk about, resilience. Resilience also in the hard infrastructure. So the construction of seawalls and bridges and that sort of stuff. So it's across the board, all of government, all of country approach to disaster management.
And you really are the coordinator. You're the coordinating ministry, as it were.
To a large degree, yes.
Yes, you're going to call the Ministry of Works, or you're going to call Ministry of Social Services, listen, we need you in Abaco, we need you in Crooked Island, wherever the case may be, and this is what we need you to do. That's kind of what you would do as the coordinating ministry.
Essentially, that's what it is. Now, there was some talk about the formation of this ministry, the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction. As you, from its name, it covers a wide range of areas. Some entity has to have responsibility for coordinating that.
Yes.
And it happens to be our ministry.
Yeah, and you were talking about mitigation, because talking about this weather phenomenon is what we're talking about, and you can't talk about that without thinking about climate change, which is affecting everything. And so, you know, we're going to have to deal with this in the future. And so my question was, you must focus a little on mitigation efforts, whatever that means for the various communities.
Sure, and so we have, government has put in place what has replaced the Bahamas, the BEST Commission,
right?
The Bahamas Environment, Science and Technology Commission is now the Department of Environmental Planning. Okay, that has focused attention for environmental matters. So when we speak of climate change, and we've heard about global warming and the impact that it has upon the climate, with high temperatures and sea level rises, and in the case of hurricanes, more frequent and more intense, then everybody at all levels need to play their role in mitigating the impacts of climate change. So, for example, we had Earth Day the other day, and there was this drive to plant more trees.
Yes.
So all of those things, as small as they may seem to individuals, collectively it has impact. And that is why there's this drive when one is building, say, a house, you have a piece of property. We want to get away from clearing the property of all the trees and then planting some imported trees. Yeah. All of these things collectively have negative impacts when you do those things.
And which means a lot of education on your part.
Yes, on all of our parts.
On all of our parts,
yes.
But education driven by you in the ministry.
Exactly.
We got to take a break. We'll talk some more about it. I want to go to Abaco when we come back, but we got to take a break. We're talking to Mr. Carl Smith. He's the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction. After this. Welcome back to A Closer Look. I'm Anthony Newbold speaking with Mr. Carl Smith, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management and Reconstruction. Said I wanted to go to Abaco.
Absolutely.
Let's go to Abaco. The Minister now, Minister of State now, and the one before has spoken quite candidly about the need for assistance in Abaco. What is the current status with Abaco? They still need a lot of assistance there.
Yes, they do, and in Grand Bahama, but
Okay.
you know, significant progress has been made.
Okay.
When one looks at electricity as an example, I can't give you the actual numbers, but I can tell you most of the residents have electricity to their homes. Now,
Right.
where you don't have it, it is largely because of the reconstruction, the improvements in their homes, and the need for the homeowners to get approval from Ministry of Works. Once they receive approval from the Ministry of Works, the BPL can move in and do the electricity connection. And you know, the hurricane, there's really been a learning from the hurricane because people now realize, look, I need to abide by the code. I need to ensure that I put the hurricane clips, that I have
Yeah.
proper roofing, and they know who the shoddy contractors were. And some of them, there's a lot of work going on in Abaco. Some of them are waiting until such time as the qualified and competent contractors are available. So it's an ongoing activity with respect to water. The delay, if you put it that way, in getting water to the people is in part due to the fact that they're putting in new lines to reduce water leakage, because the whole idea is to build back better. And
Yeah.
the hurricane provided an opportunity to improve upon the infrastructure. So if you were to visit Abaco, you would see where the wooden poles are being replaced by metal poles. These things take time, and
Yeah.
we're going to do them properly. Now, unfortunately, some of the work has been delayed, constrained by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
So moving materials in, and even, you know, in Abaco, they have a lot of winter residents or
Yeah.
foreign persons who have homes there. They're coming back, and the delay has been due primarily to COVID-19 pandemic. And now that people are being vaccinated and the supply chain is opening up, things are picking up.
And
Yes.
moving again, eh? Do you have any idea of the percentage of Abaco residents who've moved back home, who've been able to move back home?
Yes, I've had a conversation with the administrator down there, and she has indicated it's like 95%. And you know, these are people on the ground, because as
Yeah.
part of her responsibility, which is to check the voters list and that kind of thing, she has indicated, she and her colleagues, you know, they go from house to house, and so they're able to say there's some 95% of the Abaco residents who have returned back to Abaco. And as I've indicated, primarily getting people's homes back together, the delay being with the COVID, but things are progressing.
How about then, you said Grand Bahama when I mentioned let's go to Abaco.
Oh,
So tell me about Grand Bahama. How's Grand Bahama doing with regard to home and infrastructure repair?
Grand Bahama is also progressing, not as, it is not in as bad a shape, if you put it that way, as Abaco.
As Abaco.
And you know, Grand Bahama, a lot of the responsibility is with the Port Authority there. But, and you know, the groundwater was significantly affected.
Yes.
Sweeting Ski, which is associated with Grand Bahama, is getting back up. There are homes being reconstructed. There's been a donation from a private concern. And so, yes, things are moving. We would always want things to move quicker, but there's progress in the making.
And you talk about there have been some donations.
Yes.
Because it is not really the government's responsibility to rebuild a home for me or you if my home was destroyed.
But the government provides assistance.
Yes.
And assistance, we've been very fortunate. We've had over 100 and odd NGOs,
Yeah.
non-governmental organizations who have come in from around the world. And they've provided assistance across the board to persons, to individual homes, to churches. And so a lot of that did not come or pass through the government's hand. We are aware of it.
Right.
And so assistance, yes. The government has a program to repair small homes with a maximum of some $20,000. And that program is still ongoing. The funding for it, now bear in mind, I'm going to get back to COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay.
We need to face reality. And the resources of the government have been diverted in some instances to deal with that health pandemic. You know the level of unemployment that
Yes.
came about. So when one weighs everything and considers, I think it has been remarkable. And we pray that things get better, and we trust that people do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I have to interject this here. When we speak about disaster management, when we speak about NEMA, and we are going to celebrate Hurricane Preparedness Month with the theme, we are all NEMA, people need to understand that they have a role to play. And because the pandemic is so topical at this time, and we're trying to encourage people to take their vaccine, that's a mitigation measure.
Yes.
Right? So that you don't contract the disease.
Yeah.
The same thing applies to hurricanes. There are mitigation measures that you can do. And each of us have a role to play. So it's not what is NEMA doing. Yes, NEMA as an organization, and my ministry is an organization, we're doing our part, but we're all part of that. And let's work together cooperatively in achieving this goal.
So that we could get to where we need to get to.
Exactly.
And you mentioned resilience and recovery. I want to ask you a little bit more about that, but we got to take this break. And we'll be back. We're talking with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness and Reconstruction, Mr. Carl Smith, after this. Welcome back to A Closer Look. I'm Anthony Newbold, speaking with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness Management and Reconstruction, Mr. Carl Smith. Before we took the break, talking about resilience and recovery, there's a policy that the government has with respect to that? Resilience and recovery?
Yes.
A specific policy?
Yes. We had the assistance of the United Nations Development Program and the University of the West Indies, who worked collaboratively with NEMA and the DRA and our partners in developing a policy and a strategy. And part of that includes institutional, the policy itself and the strategy and the implementation plan for the institutional strengthening of the ministry and to be able to do these things.
Right.
That was presented to the cabinet, and it has been accepted by the cabinet. Now, we are in the process of implementing that strategy and plan, and it is a process that further engage other entities. So, as an example, the ministry that I serve under, NEMA, we've never had a career path for in disaster management. We've developed that career path, and I've been surprised myself to find out that there are Bahamians who have actually studied up to the doctoral level in disaster management.
Okay.
So we're going to professionalize the ministry, the government's arm of it. Of course, there are people in the private sector.
Right.
So to be able to implement this strategy across the board, across all, not just government agencies, in private sector as well. So everybody's involved with this.
As you said, everybody's got a role.
We've got a role to play. And you will see a lot of that being revealed as we commemorate or execute Hurricane Preparedness Month this month. Every day there will be activities to that effect.
One of the things that everybody saw in vivid shelters, has there been any effort to create some what we call climate resilient shelters?
Yes.
Yeah.
As we speak, in Grand Bahama, in Abaco, community center and shelters under construction. there have been donors for that, a number of donors, one of them being the Indian government, who has contributed $1 million towards it. There is an insurance, an accounting firm that has contributed funds. So that facility is under construction in Marsh Harbor. Just the other day, the Red Cross broke ground for a shelter, for its headquarters and sheltering facilities in Grand Bahama. And we recently, actually this week, got information that there's another NGO that wishes to partner with government in putting up a shelter. Now, you know, in the past, we've relied on using school rooms and that sort of stuff.
Churches.
We never really had a purpose-built facility.
Yeah.
With exception, there's a facility in Nassau, the New Providence Church on Blake Road, that was built with that in mind. And when the National Stadium was built, that was built with using it as a shelter.
NOAA says 12 named storms, 6 hurricanes, 3 of them major. However, climatologists are now saying maybe another 2 named storms. They tell me 1 more major hurricane. What else is there for the public to do other than what you're already doing to protect ourselves?
We need to take very seriously the changes that we've been seeing in climate. And as I've indicated earlier, our behavior, what we do, can mitigate the impact of these events. So planting trees, building your homes in compliance with the government code. You'll be surprised, you know, you lose your whole roof if you don't spend just a few dollars to put on the hurricane clip. I referred to Reconstruction in Abaco. The Abaconians have had an experience. It is recent experience. So now they're wanting their houses to be built on stilts or raised up away from the shoreline. You know, we have a beautiful environment and everybody wants to be on the beach. Well, there's a hazard to that, right? So we have to do things recognizing our environment, recognizing what is happening globally with the warming and the consequences that it has, and make the adjustments to our behavior.
You, in 2017, government evacuated everybody out of Ragged Island.
Yes.
Are there going to be some laws? Any thought about that, demanding that people leave an island? And you know, if you don't leave, there's some penalties other than the damage, natural damage that would come from a hurricane.
Well, you know, following Hurricane Dorian, there was an amendment to the Disaster Preparedness and Response Act, where evacuation orders were inserted into that act.
Okay.
And basically, as you know, you indicated, Hurricane Irma, there was no evacuation orders, although the government put in place or invited people to evacuate, and that was very successful, by the way. Some 1,429 persons, I think it was, were evacuated. No one's lost their lives or injury, all right? As people cooperated, if you put it that way. Now, the orders are put in place. Essentially, we're saying to you, look, this is what's going to happen. We're inviting you to leave. Should you decide not to leave, we're not going to put the first responders at risk. And furthermore, if you don't leave, there's some fines associated with it. So that's in the evacuation orders in the amended legislation that happened 2019.
But if somebody does not leave, it may be because they can't afford to leave. They got no money. Is there plans to assist people who want to leave but can't?
Oh, absolutely. You spoke about the 2017 evacuation from Ragged Island, from Auckland. That was all at government's expense. And they were moved into New Providence primarily. And some of them went into private homes, and those who didn't have shelter, the government sheltered them. Some of them didn't even want to go back. But in any event, that was a cost covered by the government. That is a primary role of government to provide safety and what have you.
And so May is Hurricane Preparedness Month.
Yes.
Real briefly, what's going to happen?
So we would have had a press conference. The minister would have spoken about that, and the activities primarily educational and appearing on shows such as yours, radio and television. A key thing that we are doing this year, we're having an exercise simulating a Category 5 hurricane that will take the path, essentially, of Matthew. Now, Matthew went up the archipelago of the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So we have had exercises to prepare for that, a planning exercise for the exercise which would happen during the week of, the third week, I think it is, in May. And now you've had to train for this. I'll give you an example. We've had new Family Island administrators appointed. They're new. Our Family Island administrators are persons who lead the charge in a Family Island. So they had to be trained in the systems, the improved systems that we have now in the Emergency Operations Center, the National Emergency Operations Center, where reporting is digitized so that we can more effectively and efficiently gather information and get the information out to the public. So that's training. We're going to exercise what we've put in place in terms of improvements to make sure that it works. That will happen. There'll also be a review of the National Disaster Plan. So we will bring in our partners and say, look, we've had this experience, things have changed, because a plan is a living document. Every day, things change. And we will review that plan in collaboration with the Pacific Disaster Center. Who've been one of our partners for some 20 years. They would facilitate that review of the National Disaster Plan. Then we have a competition, a digital essay competition, as well as an art competition during that month.
So in effect, lots of activities. People need to pay attention to what you're doing during Hurricane Preparedness Month.
Yes, they're part of it. We have to do this together.
Okay, and you got to come back because we run out of time. You got to come back and we'll talk some more about it when you're done.
Absolutely.
And thank you for watching A Closer Look. Remember, you can also see us on YouTube and on Facebook.